Hey everybody, we're in for a treat today. This is Paul with the Curators. I have a special guest and good friend, Joe Volpe, who has a lot to offer us here. And I'm excited to start with one of his songs that I think we're going to find interesting.
All the right faces, all the right places. Where did it all go wrong? Telling me this, but giving me that. Promises plenty long. Instead, it leads to nowhere. Instead, it leads to nowhere. What's the world to come to when there's nothing left for children in the wilderness? All of my money, sugar and honey, barrels of paper lost. Own less and less, tax me for the rest. The road to the great reset. Instead it leads to nowhere. 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 Get out the vote, more debt to float. Make your kids pay it back. Manage the money, what the fuck is money? Nobody's keeping track. Instead it leads to nowhere. 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 Now we play the game of fools. No teaching money in our schools. History's got a lesson for you. Tell me about your budget, then you go and fudge it. Gonna keep my own stack. Money for war, billions for y'all. Printing paper out the back. Instead it leads to nowhere. Instead it leads to nowhere. Instead it leads to nowhere. Always leads to nowhere.
Joe, that is great work. The song is Nowhere, produced, sung, created by Joe Volpe. Uh, Joe, that's the kind of thing that's missing. We remember the anti-war songs and the protest songs, and here you are with the music, the words, the images that really portray the suffering, the pain that's being experienced in the world today. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it, and I'm really glad that we've become friends on this journey together, Joe.
Me too. Me too.
Yeah, yeah. So, this song is a commentary about the debasement of government fiat currencies and the many ills that we suffer due to money printing, inflation, and the mismanagement of our economy. We know this, Joe. And we're going to talk about your public interest advocacy, your experience as a Kennedy volunteer, our experience as Kennedy volunteers, and we'll feature a little more of the music you produced in support of the public interest. We're also going to touch upon Bitcoin as an election issue and perhaps more, right? So, Joe,
Yes.
share with the audience, if you don't mind, how this song "Nowhere" came about.
I mean, it came out of I've had a lifelong of doing public advocacy work, well, since my college days, anyway. The Woodstock era, like you just mentioned, the anti-war songs, made me aware of how music can have an impact on our society, on bettering things. So I became aware of like Woody Guthrie, Pete Seeger, Dylan. And then recently, a fellow named Oliver Anthony is his stage name.
Yes.
My song
As soon,
"Nowhere" is about money, and there's a saying: "Money isn't important until you don't have any." And it's at the root of so much, and a lot of there's the saying that money is the root of all evil. Well, I read a lot of Ayn Rand, and I don't believe that. I think money is a good thing because it represents our work, our labor, our sweat. Um,
right.
I'm reminded of there was an economist in the 1800s, Henry George, and he defined wealth as wealth is created when human hands and intellect combine to create something of value. So, for example, if I take a tree that's fallen down and I cut it up and make a table out of it, someone's going to see that table and realize, hey, I need this, and they'll be willing to give me money or a cow or beads or whatever the currency is, something that has value. So if we look at wealth, that's wealth. It comes from us. So it represents, money comes from us. It belongs to us. It comes out of our work, much the same way that language does. So now for the state to co-opt that and create fiat money by decree and impose it by force, and then manipulate the price, all of this is unnatural. And it's bad because it allows for all kinds of shenanigans that funnel wealth away from those who produce it, and they give it to privileged interests that we allow to control our government. So,
Yeah.
We have
Yes.
the separation of church and state. It's a good thing, wise. The separation of money and state would be wise as well, because it's like free speech or freedom of worship and the free press. Money is foundational to freedom. So that's why Bitcoin has been such an important development.
And so a couple of things I want to harken back to on the graphics that you displayed in your song. The first one that jumps out at me is the $35.3 trillion in debt, which is now, I think, close to 36 trillion. So it must have been a couple of days that you that have passed, but it only takes 100 days for the government to incur $1 trillion of debt now, and that's the financialization aspect that you and I both hope that the people listening to this and everyone will begin to understand. That is the bastardization of money, Joe, right?
Yes.
Money is like a stored energy. You described it very well. It's the ability for us to exchange our resources one for another in a fair and equal system with guardrails. But once we start giving government the power to print money, that diminishes the value for the rest of us. And I think we were also in the video there was a reference to our health system. Our lifespans are 6 years shorter than those of our European counterparts, 8 years shorter than those in Japan or Switzerland. We used to live just as long as them, only 50 years ago. So something is going on here where our health, our years of our lives, and when I say our health, I'm not just talking physical, I'm talking financial, emotional, mental, spiritual. Our health is being exchanged for the profit motive. Wherever that $35 trillion is sitting right now, because it's gone, they're the ones who have benefited disproportionately at the expense of the people. The people who make the laws, the legislators, are the ones who are closest to the money printing spigot. How do we reach them as an electorate in a way that can force the change that you and I know needs to happen?
Well, it's now an election issue for the first time. Bitcoin is
Mm-hmm.
particularly, and you know, it's like a big wake up call. People didn't really give much thought to it. It's, we don't teach it in our schools. Money, um, how these things work. Most people don't understand what fractional reserve banking means. That money is created out of nothing. Uh, you know,
Credit-based system. Yep.
right, right. So, um, both presidential candidates. Well, I'm talking about Robert Kennedy and Trump together have made it an election issue, with good reason. I mean, Kennedy announced his support for it in 2023, and Trump followed the following year. And I think they're just simply recognizing the importance of it towards freedom and financial sanity, because people are suddenly prompted to ask, well, what is money? And it's like a light bulb went off in this dark hole of our education system, that people don't understand. What is money? Money is what we create. It comes from us. So I think people around the world are realizing the beauty of the design and the inevitability of Bitcoin once they learn more about it, because it has utility. People want it because it's useful. In many ways, I would just encourage people, just Google it, or ask an AI, what are the features of Bitcoin that make it so important? And most people couldn't name them, but
Fundamentally, we know it can't be debased, right? We know there's a maximum threshold of Bitcoin that will ever be developed. That's written into the code, and we're approaching that over a period of time. In fact, we're, I think, 85% of the way there already. So now any Bitcoin that's issued is just going to be a little bit at a time. And so to me, its most redeeming feature is its scarcity. You can't print Bitcoin, but you can sure as hellfire print dollars.
yes,
If you're the
yes.
world's reserve currency, which is exactly what our government has been doing, and the rest of the world doesn't like that, Joe.
I mean, I remember reading about how in Rome, they had gold coins. It was the gold coins. They were starting to debase the value of the coin by replacing a lot of the gold content with nickel and other metals.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently they got to a point where Rome wanted taxes to be paid in foreign coins, because the foreign coins had more gold in them.
Mm-hmm.
So they debased their currency. And this is an old story, and it always leads to nowhere. It always leads to so many societal ills. Some of the feedback I've gotten on Nowhere, somebody said, well, what does domestic violence have to do with inflation? And it's like, when people can't afford to put food on the table, and they're losing their jobs, and they're drinking, and domestic violence and childhood trauma, divorce, a lot of these homelessness, this all comes from the bastardization of money, or in large part, I would
And
say.
if you print money like we've been doing, you can create the illusion of wealth. You can give people the new kitchen granite countertop, the second car in the driveway. I say this all the time. And as long as you're just close enough to that money printing spigot, you can experience benefit. But there is, and this is what people fail to see, there is a commensurate liability on the other side that nobody wants. People are just saying, well, we'll worry about that later. We'll let the next generation deal with it. We'll let the rest of the world deal with it. Well, guess what? We're having to deal with it now in this country in ways that you just described. And if we connect the dots, we can see the connection between this insidious inflation tax and how money is being played like a shell game, taking from one group or one class of people and giving it to another. I wanted to ask you about gold, Joe. I've always been a gold aficionado, seeing it as a form of reserve currency that things really started to go off the rails when we went off the gold standard in 1971.
Temporarily.
Well, It's only been 52 years. Joe. It's
In
still
quotes, temporarily.
right. So I think there's there's something to be said, and if you look at the trend in gold recently, you can see that something's going on here with the dollar and the global pushback against the dollar. I'm not against Bitcoin. I like the long history of gold as a proven reserve asset. Conceptually, I love the idea of Bitcoin as well, and perhaps there's a place for both in the world. Um, my questions with Bitcoin, I'll share them with you that I still have unanswered in my head. Okay, getting down to first principles about Bitcoin. Who is Satoshi? Number one. Number two, who are the whales? And finally, why was Gary Gensler teaching courses at MIT in cryptocurrency at the very same time that BlackRock's Larry Fink and Jamie Dimon of JP Morgan were bashing Bitcoin publicly, as well as anyone else in government like Janet Yellen, and you heard them saying all bad things about Bitcoin, as Gensler is teaching his MIT students something completely different. That there's a disconnect there that I haven't been able to make sense of. And I love Michael Saylor. I love that you showed his face. I think he's the Magellan of our financial future.
Yeah, so. Apparently Japan's largest pension fund has bought a lot of Michael Saylor's MicroStrategy stock because MicroStrategy owns so much Bitcoin now. Their stock has gone through the roof. I think, certainly the advent of Larry Fink changing over and with the ETFs has totally changed the game. I cannot explain what Gary Gensler is all about. That's a mystery to me. Other than that he has a job to do, and maybe his job is to suppress the fact that he met with Sam Bankman-Fried on multiple occasions and didn't see that fiasco coming speaks for itself. And the funniest one, if it is funny, is Jamie Dimon repeatedly bashing Bitcoin, saying he would fire anybody who traded in his staff that worked for him if they traded Bitcoin. And we find out all along that he's been buying it. So watch what they do, not what they say. Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, and the other thing, when people say that Bitcoin is backed by nothing, the simple answer to that is it's backed by its usefulness, its utility. People want to use it, and they are using it, especially in countries where there's high inflation or dictatorial governments. People are finding this is a very useful thing. So the utility of it is what gives it value. Doesn't have to be backed by gold per se.
Right.
We're living in interesting times.
Yes, indeed. I'm intrigued, Joe, by the three-letter prefix con, C-O-N. We learned about the concept of con in the movie The Sting, which it was the con that they took on back in the 1930s, I believe it was, right? The Great Con, and then. But we also know that con is the prefix for the word confidence, right? It's also the prefix for the word confiscate. So I think of that prefix and the duality of its meaning, and how that relates to money. It certainly leaves some unanswered questions, and that's why I think with Bitcoin. It's so new, it's so nascent, it's in its baby phase, right? Let's keep questioning. Let's love it. Let's accept it. Let's embrace it. But let's keep questioning it too. But I want to get back to you and your songwriting and your public advocacy, because that's been part of your journey. And I love getting into this stuff. Can you share with us a little bit more about the history of your experience there?
I got sort of came out of the matrix when in my college years. I went to Hunter College in New York in 1979, and right around that time there was a big uproar on Long Island. I grew up on Long Island about the Shoreham nuclear power plant that was being built there on the North Shore, and I led a group of students to a protest there. And thank God that the governor at the time, Governor Mario Cuomo, abandoned the whole project before it was even completed. Billions of dollars were wasted. Abandoned for the simple reason that he rationalized that you cannot evacuate Long Island or New York City in the event of a 3 Mile Island event.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was that. And at the same time, there was a gigantic rally concert down at the World Trade Center site, the No Nukes concert, where I listened to I heard from people like Michio Kaku, who was a young physicist at the time, in his early 30s, and activist Bonnie Raitt. So I had an early experience in public advocacy there. Then NYPIRG was founded by Ralph Nader, and that was the Public Interest Research Groups, the New York Public Interest Research Group. We had an office on campus at Hunter College, and today there are still campuses that have PIRG offices. And during that time, the El Salvador Civil War was going on, and that was a big issue on campus. And I led 2 busloads of students and faculty to a Pentagon protest. And I had a couple of matrix moments then. I was very naive. The first one was as we walked past, and there were thousands of people in DC at this time, at this rally. As we walked past the Pentagon, there were scores of cameras, movie cameras, and photographic cameras, photographing all of our faces. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, you really can't speak out against the war, and this was after Kent State as well. The second matrix moment was a month or so after that. I was in the NYPIRG office at Hunter College with another activist, and a man came into the office asking questions about who on campus had organized that protest. And he was carrying a bunch of pamphlets from the admissions office. He had a beard. He was trying to look kind of cool. He was probably in his 30s. And he was looking for me. And the hair went up on the back of my neck.
Have you seen the bill that is in front of, I think it's in Australia right now, where they're passing limitations on the ability for citizens to engage in free speech, right?
Yeah. And I've heard about that. And I've heard about apparently over in England, hundreds of people have been arrested for their Facebook posts.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So people better, I don't think people understand how important free speech is. It's the foundational, there's a reason why it's the First Amendment, why it's there, because everything else follows.
What's that gentleman's name? Pavel Dubov, the CEO of Telegram, was arrested in France recently.
Yes.
So they are cracking down. This is, and I know for you and for me as well, that this is getting, the people are waking up, Joe. And so what is the state going to do? They're going to try to clamp down. We're seeing it in many ways, right? Freedom of speech, medical freedom is under attack. That's been a big...
Paul, I'm still in shock over that people were fired from their jobs for refusing an experimental drug that I thought the Nuremberg Code was respected.
It's unconstitutional. Pure
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. It's unbelievable what took place. And there's just a lot of desperation in government and the people who are trying to control everything. So, we just have to, I'm assuming there will be more black swan events because they're easy to conduct and they're very, very useful in scaring people. And people are perfectly willing to give up. They'll demand martial law if things get bad enough.
The bird flu is kind of lingering out there as a potential black swan that they have lined up and ready to go, and that's been the case for months now. I've been getting some information about that. I'm part of a group which you may know about. I want to invite you in, of course, at any time you want. It's called Health Revolution USA, which I'm working on. with Jacqueline Capriati, Karen McDonough, and Johnny Paradise, and a few other people. And we're trying to highlight this sort of collusion between, not sort of, this actual collusion between these industrial complexes and the government. We're talking about the medical industrial complex, the military, the media, and often all of these working together, right? And of course, the monetary, which we've been talking about today, the monetary industrial complex, which involves, these lawmakers and the Fed and the central banks around the world, and the Treasury, and the demeaning of the value of our labor. This is what I say, Joe. We've turned. I've said this too many times, but I'm going to say it one more time. We've turned Bedford Falls into Pottersville, and that is, Mr. Potter is in charge.
Yeah, it's funny how that movie comes back.
It is the depiction, and I love how Bobby Kennedy to me is that George Bailey character who is here to restore us back to Bedford Falls, and everything in his platform that he's represented to me has been about restoring power to the people and calling out and holding accountable those who seek to undermine the public interest. And I think that's why so many of us love him and have stood by him and want to see him succeed, because we know he's working for us, right?
Yeah, it's a wonderful life for the young viewers. For people, everybody should watch that, because you can see Pottersville, you can see it happening.
Right. The movie, It's a Wonderful Life, which it's a classic for us, right? Young people, they may not know about it, but and it's not the only movie, I think, that depicts this sort of the ways that, evil can triumph over good in the short term. But what I love about George Bailey is that he found his redemption in understanding the value and the dignity of life, and in recognizing his service to others, and that's where the true value of self-worth comes, not in the material acquisition of things, which is where our society has gone, right? So you have another song you're going to play for us here. It's called Heal Yourself.
Yes, and I'll say a few words about it, about
Please.
where this comes from. It had to do with my advocacy when for a dietary supplement called Kratom. Around 2016 or so, at the behest of the FDA, the DEA was going to make Kratom a Schedule I drug. Now, Kratom is a tree leaf; it's a tea, and I had discovered it. I was prescribed opiate painkillers. I had chronic back problems, and Kratom tea I was able to have a cup of Kratom tea in the morning, and I could stop taking the painkillers. And so when I heard that they were going to make me a felon for using this tea, I got involved for the first time in advocacy for medical freedom, because this was, to me, a form of tyranny, that the pharmaceutical industry did not want any competition for its painkillers, and they weren't going to allow a very inexpensive natural tree leaf tea to get in the way of that. And the FDA was lying to the public. Another Matrix moment, even during COVID, Dr. Scott Gottlieb, they kept parading him out. He was the former head of the FDA. But a few years earlier, he was in charge of the FDA, and they were putting out all kinds of public service announcements about how Kratom was killing people. Kratom never killed anybody in Asia, where it comes from. What was happening is that bad actors were combining Kratom with other drugs and other products, and there may have been some injuries from that. But the FDA was trying to vilify pure Kratom itself. So, Heal Yourself. I went to a rally in the White House. I took some videotape, and I later wrote the song Heal Yourself. So that's what this song is about, that advocacy.
It reminds me of ivermectin was treated in the early days of COVID, and there was this whole propaganda war against the use of ivermectin, which was one of the safest drugs ever on the market, and but they created this whole narrative about how it was a horse tranquilizer, and for the very same reason, Joe, it went against their financial interest, right?
Exactly.
And that's the key. There's a financial incentive and a propaganda war. Profit comes first and foremost in every case, and that's the demonstration of the medical industrial complex that we are seeing far too often. And it's not just medical; it's the food industry, the agriculture industry, the chemical industry. The list goes on, and it's no wonder why we're living 6 years shorter lifespans here than we were a generation or two ago. That we're talking about 2 billion years of life in America that's been robbed from us. That's when you determine the population. It's an easy math problem, and it's almost incomprehensible. People just don't want to look at it. So let's.
There people. We're so bombarded with propaganda,
Mm,
and the media doesn't talk about, well, like what RFK says, the most profitable thing in this country is a sick child,
yes,
because you've
yes,
got them for the rest of their life. They need your meds.
that's
So
what they want.
make them
Let's.
sick, keep them sick, sell them drugs.
The perfect time for your song. Let's hear your song, and we'll pick it up on the other side.
Come on now, listen, the tide's on the rise. You can't believe what you see with your own eyes. Foxes in the hen house, stealing the world. Rain in the sky, trees from the earth. Come on now, listen to the truth inside. Now you can see with more than your eyes. Heal yourself, heal yourself. Don't need the lawman handling your health. Come on now, listen, the time that draws near. You can't believe the whispers in your ear. There's a brain in your head, a heart in your chest. Come on now, listen, it's perfectly clear. Now that you're listening with more than your ears. Heal yourself, heal yourself. Don't need a banker to manage your wealth. Heal yourself, heal yourself. Don't need a lawman handling your health. Come on now, listen, all you that deny. There's cotton in your ears, there's mud in your eye. We eat from the dirt, we drink from the sky. We are made of the earth, and the earth is our right. Come on now, listen and open your eyes. Heal yourself, heal yourself. You don't need a judge on your medicine shelf. Heal yourself, heal yourself. You don't need a banker to manage your wealth. Heal yourself, heal yourself. You don't need the lawman handling your health. Heal yourself, heal yourself.
Wow. A couple of things occur to me there, Joe. One is that, the Sackler family, who is behind the OxyContin fiasco, Purdue Pharma, right? They've been vilified, and rightly so, but I'm not so sure that they're the exception to the rule in the industry. It sounds like they're pretty much a representation of the industry. It's just that these big pharma companies seem to have better PR. They control the airwaves, and but they're no less interested in undermining public health. Now, this is not to say that there aren't wonderful drugs out there. There are wonderful doctors out there. The issue becomes about motive and incentive, and when things are discovered that would go against their financial interests, that's when the problems start to arise, right? So when studies may come up with, revealing that there are serious side effects, Vioxx comes to mind with that, right, from Merck, where we knew that they were delivering heart attacks to people, and that was covered up. We're talking about an industry that's been penalized so many billions of dollars. They're just a criminal cartel. We can say that factually, right? And the other thing that comes to mind is that nature is the greatest source of healing. You talk, I'm just a tea leaf. There was a time in America pre-1900 where all medicine was basically holistic. But industry got in there, starting with the Rockefellers and the Flexner Report in 1910. And I don't know if you're familiar with that, but my friend Martha McGee has enlightened me on some of that, and you can just see now the progression of the commandeering over time of medicine by this industrial complex. So those are a couple of thoughts I had, and this is why we love Bobby Kennedy, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So
I've seen tears in his eyes speaking about the damage that's being done to children.
Right. Absolutely. What do you think of his alliance with Donald Trump?
I mean, I wasn't happy that he suspended his campaign. I'm not a Trump fan, but I have to say that when Kennedy came to the point where he realized that they were not going to allow him a path to the presidency, it was ridiculous with the way the media treated him, the way the Democratic National Committee treated him. I had gone out when I volunteered to get ballots. We got 3 times the needed ballots in Pennsylvania. New York, they had 140,000 signatures, ballot signatures, and these were thrown out, just discarded. So when Kennedy decided to align with Trump, I was upset, but I listened to what he had to say, and Paul, I trust him. I trust what he says. If you're going to trust anybody, I will trust him. And if this was his choice, I'm going to back it. But I am impressed, that Trump would have a statesman like him in his corral. That Kennedy has Trump's ear, because Trump has said repeatedly that Kennedy is a smart man, certainly knowledgeable, certainly growing up with the red telephone in Hannesport, where he remarked once that he was a child, but you could pick up the red phone and Khrushchev would be on the other end. He's been around. He's seen a lot of stuff. So I just have to go with him. He is assuring us that Trump is not the same man he was during his first presidential administration. Trump's been accused of, he's driven through court cases like crazy, assassination attempts. What he's been through now, he's got to be somebody different. And Kennedy is assured through his meetings with Trump's campaign that Kennedy, if Trump does get elected, Kennedy will have a voice. And I can only hope that his policies will see the light of day in this alliance, because otherwise the media is just making him out to be a dangerous liar. And none of that's true. So those are my feelings about that. I'm just going to have to hope that, in the first time around, Trump actually had asked Kennedy to consider being on the cabinet, maybe as the head of Health and Human Services, where Kennedy would have had regulatory control over the FDA, the NIH, these criminal, and I say that without any doubt in my mind, that these are criminal organizations. They are killing people and doing harm for money. And it's right in front of our eyes. So Trump bows to the bureaucracy at the time. He puts Alex Azar in charge of the Health and Human Services. Azar had just come from managing the pharmaceutical giant Eli Lilly for 5 years. Where do you think his loyalties lie? Where do you think he's going to regulate the pharmaceutical industry? You know, the whole revolving door thing that goes on with the USDA being run by Monsanto, you know, the FDA being run by the guy who used to run, you know, Eli Lilly. I mentioned Scott Gottlieb, Dr. Do No Harm, Dr. Scott Gottlieb, who lied to the public when he was head of the FDA about kratom. I would love it if Kennedy had some influence with the head with Health and Human Services. So
Can't happen soon enough.
Yeah.
Can't,
so
you know.
yeah, I mean, I understand that, you know, my wife will not vote for Trump, and that's her. You know, these people have to make their choices. You know, I'm going to vote for Trump because I cannot, in any conscience, vote for the Democratic National Committee's behavior and what they've done. So if Kennedy will have a voice in Washington, if he'll have some sway in Washington, that will be where I vote.
I live in New Jersey. It appears I have the option of voting for Bobby Kennedy in New Jersey. I think that's where my allegiance will remain. I have felt, and I'm sure you felt this too, you described it, you know, that this independent movement has been so incredibly important. One that Bobby Kennedy asked us to join him in just about a year ago this week, where he asked us to declare our independence and break up this two-party system that is hell-bent on destroying our democracy and the fabric of our society. I take that independent movement very seriously. It's in my bones, it's in my blood. And it's rooted in unity. It's rooted in tolerance, in kindness, in solutions, and not blaming people or vilifying or being vindictive, Joe, but rather holding people accountable, right, for their actions. Some of the actions we've been talking about today, and you know, I have a long history following Donald Trump. I grew up about 3 miles from him in Queens, and I followed him, and the history of people who have dealt with him, who have, you know, done work with him or for him. It's not very kind, you know. So I struggle to you know, and we all have our vote. We all vote our conscience, and I would never tell anyone who to vote for. But for me, I struggle to get to the place of trusting Bobby on Donald Trump. And I would like to see Bobby have his agenda accomplished, but I'm still holding out hope for an independent movement gaining more traction, not less, in 2028. Or even sooner in the down ballot areas. You know, we have independent candidates running in Congress now. Dennis Kucinich is running in Ohio, and Dan Osborne in Nebraska. I think these are really, really important, you know, candidates to consider, because this independent movement can begin to gain traction from the bottom up, right? That's important. So, and we haven't met in person yet, but you've been a tremendous help to me in more ways than you know, and the message that we carry together with the Curators is something that I really hope goes far and wide, because we know what it's about. We know the importance of the message, and I just want to ask you if you have any concluding thoughts.
I just want to thank you, because I've seen you being tireless, and the amount of content that you've produced and the people that you're interviewing are very impressive. You know, some of the people you've had on
well, that includes today.
Well, thank you. I'm going to include myself in that list, right? No, but Paul, I think people like you,
Yeah.
all the power to you. God bless.
Well, Joe, if only I didn't have a day job, we would be doing even more. But so be it. It is what it is, and our team at the Curators I'm feeling good about it. We're going to grow, and I'm committed to the message, and it's just great to have. You're a songwriter and musician, and it's funny because I feel like there's a connection between the Curators and the uh, perhaps the entertainment industry, and specifically the singer-songwriter community. I think we're developing a little camaraderie there, which I love. So you heard me mention Martha McGee. You've seen the video with my friend Dana Butterfly McCoy.
I saw Dana yesterday, 2 days ago at the Rescue the Republic
Okay.
rally. Yeah, I
Yes.
saw her in the audience several times. The camera happened to keep catching her.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. Yes.
Mm.
She wrote a great song uh,
Yes.
for Bobby Kennedy. There are worse things than dying.
Yeah.
So now we've got Heal Yourself and Nowhere to add to our repertoire, and we'll end it there, Joe. Okay.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you so much.